amazing musicians we have here in this congregation. Thank you for that gift of music that you have shared with us this morning. So there's this tendency you may have noticed in Unitarian Universalism to describe ourselves by what we are not. This is understandable. So much of what we have seen done in the name of religion in the world disturbs us. We are not that is often our first impulse when asked to define what it is that we are all about. So much of what we have experienced in the name of religion has hurt us, and we want to distance ourselves from that. We are not the thing that hurt us, that hurt those we love, is an understandable response. It's much harder sometimes to articulate what we are. In all my years, nothing has helped clarify what my faith is quite like the service learning trips that I have participated in and led over the years. After all, it's hard enough to explain Unitarian Universalism to someone in a shared cultural context. And when you throw in language differences and cultural differences, it gets even harder. First, we have that long name, right, that you usually have to repeat more than once. And when I run into someone here in Santa Barbara and they ask what Unitarian Universalism is, perhaps I might say something like this. Well, we have our roots in the Protestant tradition, but over the past century, we have evolved into a very pluralistic faith. We are a progressive religion with room for humanists and atheists and agnostics and people from Jewish and Buddhist and Muslim and Hindu backgrounds, and that's not to mention the religious naturalists among us. And at that point, the person's eyes start to glaze over, and I try to bring it back home, but we share common values of love and justice and the worth and dignity of all people. And hopefully that hits home and brings them back around. But all of these words, all of these explanations of our faith with this very long name, I have learned to hold very lightly when traveling. These words don't make much sense when you are sitting next to a Hopi elder at the end of the day after working on a roof, looking out over the desert where her ancestors have lived for nearly 1,000 years, and she tells you about being sent away to a boarding school as a girl, away from everything she ever knew, stripped of her language and religion and family, only to find her way back to this spot where she prays at sunrise every morning for all of us, she tells me, for the whole world. And then she turns and says, "So, you're a minister, like in a church? What church are you a part of?" And talking about the Protestant Reformation at that point seems inadequate. Or when you're sharing a meal with someone who has traveled for weeks or months across continents by foot and train and bus and truck on a journey of survival with only what they could carry, that and the hope in their heart. And they speak a language that you only have bits and pieces of, and they learn you're a minister, and they call you sister and ask you to share a prayer with them, and all of a sudden you have to refigure your entire relationship with the idea of Jesus and Mary and all the saints. And along the way, you realize you have your own prayers for humanity and your own journeys of survival. And all you need to say in that moment is that love is what brings us together. And because of that love, we want to try and build a better world. Sometimes what matters is not so much being able to articulate what we do and don't believe in, but rather understand within ourselves what we are for, what calls us out of our comfort zone into the world. And the answer I keep coming back to over and over again is another big term: collective liberation. Love calls us out of our isolation and into the work of collective liberation, the idea that none of us are free until all of us are free. Collective liberation, which means that when the conditions of our lives and the identities we inhabit do not limit our ability to thrive and survive. Not just for some of us, but for all of us. We get free together. As the famous quote from an Aboriginal activist group in Queensland, Australia says, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come here because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." So we have to get together. We have to find each other. Find each other, as we just sang. We have to get out of the bubbles that naturally form around us, our everyday paths that take us from home to work, to friends, to family, maybe here to the Unitarian Society on Sundays and back home. If we want to get free, we have to get together outside of these established routines. Now, there's nothing wrong with having established routines, right? It's how we live as human beings. Finding comfort in the familiar, developing habits, this is not a problem in and of itself. If we didn't have familiar places and habits, if we had to make every decision like it was the first time we're making that decision every single day, we would be too exhausted to do anything else. But if we want to expand our understanding of the world and ourselves, if we want to work for collective liberation for a purpose larger than ourselves, if we want to be of service in the way that Dr. Remmer talked about it, sometimes we have to move intentionally outside of our bubbles and well-worn paths. Which is why I think Rumi sings with praise for the wanderer, for the lover of leaving, like the song we sang at the opening of this service. The spiritual path requires us to wander from our familiar landscape into unknown territory from time to time. But how we do it matters. How we get together across differences of identity and lived experience and historical harm, how we get together in ways that liberate us, that free us. Instead of reinforcing old patterns of oppression, it matters that we do this work thoughtfully and with care. Which is why Charlotte and I wanted to lead the service together this morning, because whether you're going on any one of these trips or not, you are part of this work. And we must do it together, thoughtfully and with care. When we talk about service learning, about leaving our familiar routines to intentionally learn through service to and with others, we can't just head out into the road with good intentions and a full tank of gas. And this is where Rachel Naomi Remen's words have helped shape my understanding. I first came across her work about 12 years ago when I was brought in as part of a small team of people to help draft a service learning framework for the UU College of Social Justice. The tagline for the College of Social Justice is experiential learning for spiritually grounded activism. And they work to connect Unitarian Universalists to this opportunity to serve in all kinds of ways. And I had led several service trips back to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, and I had worked deeply on a curriculum about UU social justice history, and so I was thrilled to be working with this organization whose whole mission was to better equip people for experiential learning opportunities. And one of the other members of the team brought Remen's essay to share with us, and it became a core part of the framework that we used, this distinction between helping and fixing and serving. That's why we don't call them fixing trips. They're service learning trips. Dr. Remen is not a theologian, at least not by trade. She is first and foremost a physician. But her grandfather was an Orthodox rabbi whose stories shaped her worldview at a young age. And later in life, her work with cancer patients and her own diagnosis with Crohn's disease transformed her understanding of what it meant to be in a healing profession. And in her essay, where she talks about this, she tells the story of an emergency room doctor and the sudden delivery of a baby one night in the ER. The baby came quickly, and before he knew it, he was holding this newborn and cleaning her nose with one of those little squeezy bulb things. And suddenly, this baby opened her eyes and looked right at him. And Remen writes, in that instant, Harry stepped past all of his training and realized a very simple thing, that he was the first human this baby girl had ever seen. He felt his heart go out to her in welcome from all people everywhere. And tears came to his eyes. Harry has delivered hundreds of babies and has always enjoyed the excitement of making rapid decisions and testing his own competency. In the past, he has been preoccupied with his expertise, assessing and responding to needs and dangers. He had been there many times as an expert, but never before as a human being. It seems that in that moment, Harry and the baby met each other as equals, as fellow humans, not as the strong doctor and the weak infant dependent on his care, but as two whole and holy creatures brought together. And in that moment, Harry was serving the infant, not helping her or fixing her, and being in service to the well-being of this child, recognized that what he was really doing was being in service to the well-being of humanity as a whole. Dr. Remen goes on to say, service is not an experience of strength or expertise. Service is an experience of mystery, surrender, and awe. Servers may experience from time to time a sense of being used by larger unknown forces. Those who serve have traded a sense of mastery for an experience of mystery, and in doing so have transformed their work and their lives into practice. This world seems like it wants to push us towards mastery all the time, right? That the ultimate goal of life is being in control, being the boss. Service learning is an opportunity for counter-programming. It's a chance to embrace mystery over mastery and be reminded that the world is so big and the scope of human experience is so vast that humility is the only rational response. And any expertise we gain is highly local. And what connects us is not what we know, but how we come into proximity with one another and how we treat each other when we are there in that moment together. And when we participate in service learning as a congregation, these learnings from the trips, they're not owned by the individuals traveling, but brought back to enrich our whole community. Our congregation becomes in that proximity, across that table of life with those who may be physically distant, but whose lives and stories are now bound up with our own. And the future we are able to create together shifts because of that proximity. On every service trip I've ever taken, there's always a point at which it becomes clear how limited my own understanding actually is. But at the same time, that awareness of those limitations don't diminish the value of the experience or the connection that is possible between human beings. Our human relationships, thankfully, are not dependent upon us knowing everything about each other, or we would be in big trouble. But rather, it's about how we treat each other despite the gaps in our knowing. It reminds me of the poem by Wendell Berry, The Real Work. It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And that when we no longer know which way to go, we have come to our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings. And I'll close with sharing this memory from one night on the Hopi reservation on one of the early trips. And we are camping at the property of our host, Dee Satella, and it's rugged and it's cold. And Dee has no electricity or running water. And there are not many other houses nearby, so there's no lights to dim the night sky. And everyone is in their tents, and I walk a little way out into the desert to get a clear view. Visiting Hopi is this immersive experience. Even though we are officially still in the state of Arizona, the whole cultural landscape has changed. Language and social cues and family relationships and laws and traditions and even the aesthetic of what is displayed in people's homes, everything is new and unfamiliar. And it's tiring being in that kind of environment. And for a few days, it had been like diving into the deep end of a pool. And so as I'm standing there, I'm humbled by how I have barely the faintest idea of what is going on around me most of the time on this trip. And I feel the weight of this history that is ever present, but is completely outside of my scope of knowing. And as I look up in the night sky, I'm overwhelmed by this feeling of being a guest. Not just at Dee's, not just at the Hopi reservation, but on the earth itself. And that weight shifts somehow. It becomes bearable when I release myself from the need to know what is going on at all times and allow myself to be simply present to what is, whether knowable or not. Like the stars in the sky, real and present and mysterious all at the same time. And as I walk back past the tents of the others, past the quiet giggling from some of the youth who will no doubt be very tired the next morning, I realize that although I am having this feeling of being a guest, there is not that loneliness that I often have felt in those kinds of moments, because everyone, everywhere is in the same boat, that same blue boat as we sing in one of our favorite hymns. And when we return home after having dropped off boxes of food and painted an outhouse and patched up a roof, simple things that need to be done, and so we do them, I carry with me that guest feeling home too. Even here, where I have lived for so long, I remember that even here there is more mystery than mastery, even in the habits and routines that make up my daily life. So if someone asked me now what Unitarian Universalism is, I would say, we are a faith that teaches us that what brings us closer together is not what we believe, but how we choose to live. Called by love to be in service to one another, knowing that our liberation is bound up together. Called by love to be in service to one another, knowing that our liberation is bound up together. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.